Hello everyone. I want to talk a little bit about your second exam and what you can do to prepare for it. The exam will occur during the regular scheduled time for the class, so when we normally meet during the lab time. We'll go over the course objectives, some logistics in terms of how to prepare for this exam, a bit of the focus of the modules, and then what I would recommend you do for preparation. I'm not going to read through all the course objectives, but they're listed here um, for the sections that we'll be covering. Um, the ones where there might be some gaps here are things that we had previously covered in the material for the first exam. And here are the remainder of those. For the exam, we have 5 modules that are covered on the second exam, and here we're listing the about the amount of the exam that each of those modules will cover. So about 20% for each of the modules. A little bit less for the last one that was covered. There wasn't quite as much information there, and some of the information was actually a bit of review from the previous module 10. And then the ones that are a little bit more are the modules where there was sort of new material that was covered during the lab time. So pretty much all of these modules are going to be important. A little bit about the timing for this exam. So we'll have 90 minutes set aside for the completion of the exam. When you're done with the exam, you are free to go. So we do not have a lab scheduled this day. We often have a makeup lab at the same time as the exam. However, it turns out with classes only on Wednesdays, we don't have any holidays getting in the way of our lab time. So we don't need to do that this time. So once you have taken the exam, you are free to go for the day. In terms of some items, you will need to have some things and you will need to know what other things will be provided for you. So as always, you will be provided with a periodic table, so you always have that. There's some additional things that I will be providing for you as well. I will provide you the solubility rules from table 7.2 of your textbook. Heats of fusion and vaporization, those are tables 12.2 and 12.3. And some constants and equations, so I will provide you the value of R, the gas constant, the conversion from atmospheres to millimeters of mercury, and the conversion from Kelvin to Celsius. So all of that information is going to be provided for you on the exam. You will need to know when to use that information. So it's not going to be provided for you within the question itself. You will need to know when to go look up on the various tables for this information. So just be aware of that. You will need to have a pencil and a calculator. Very important that you have a calculator and that there will be calculations that will take too long if you try to do them without a calculator. As before, you may have a note card. It is okay to bring a note card to the exam with anything else you think is important written on that card. But you should not have a cell phone visible during the exam. So that your calculator should not be your cell phone. So you should have another thing to use as a calculator, and you shouldn't be using your cell phone for anything while the exam is taking place. If you do have some kind of an emergency that you need to be on call for, you would need to be ready to basically miss some of your exam time by leaving the room to take that call if necessary. I want to very quickly highlight each of these modules in terms of the information you would need to know for the exam. So in Module 7, we talked about properties of light. We talked about electron configurations. periodic trends related to electron configurations, the Lewis structures and octet rule, Lewis structures for molecules, and the shapes and polarity of molecules. So you want to, there's a lot of information there, right? So that's over 2 chapters essentially. So you want to be comfortable with any of that. For Module 8, we looked at properties of gases. So you want to know a little bit about kinetic molecular theory, the relationship between the gas properties. So if you change one of those 4 properties, what will happen to any one of the other 3? Be able to use the ideal gas law, be able to do calculations involving partial pressure, and then stoichiometry that could involve the ideal gas law as well. So this is where we're connecting back to Module 6. So you want to be able to do that kind of calculation as well. In Module 9, we looked at attractive forces. So you want to know the 3 intermolecular forces. We talked about hydrogen bonds, dipole-dipole forces, and dispersion forces. You want to know about ionic bonds and metallic bonds. You want to be able to do calculations related to phase changes and be able to interpret the heating curve. Know how to use the solubility rules and know when you have something that will be either a precipitate or that will remain in solution, and be able to, using those rules, predict and balance precipitation reactions and write complete and net ionic equations. Module 10, we looked at properties of solution. So solubility and things that will affect that, such as pressure, temperature, and the solvent to solute, the relationship between the solute and the solvent. What are electrolytes and properties of electrolytes and non-electrolytes? You need to be able to perform calculations related to measures of concentration. So we discussed molarity, we discussed percent concentration, be able to use the dilution equation correctly, and be able to do stoichiometry problems involving solutions. So particularly, you would want to be able to do a titration type stoichiometry problem. And then be aware of colligative properties, so boiling point elevation, freezing point depression, and osmosis. Finally, we had Module 11. So be aware of the properties of acids and bases. The Bronsted-Lowry definition related to conjugates, so conjugate acid, conjugate base. Perform calculations related to pH, and also understand how buffers work. So that is a little bit of a reminder of what each of these modules is about and the information from them that you need to understand to do well on this exam. These are my recommendations to you to prepare for the exam. So first of all, go back through all of the worksheets you've had from each of these modules. Make sure you know how to do any of the questions on any of those worksheets. Make a note card for yourself of information that you want to always be able to look up in order to solve a problem. Take the practice exam. Treat it like an exam, so maybe set aside about 75 minutes to do that and see how well you feel about how you do on that exam. Very important to get a good night's sleep before the exam. Make sure to eat a nice breakfast. Even if you don't do these things on most nights, you want to kind of treat your brain well right before the exam, and hopefully it does a good job for you. So even if these are not things you normally do, I highly recommend them the night and morning prior to an exam. And then at any point in this process, please feel free to ask questions. There's a discussion board for exam 1, so you can post any questions there. You can come to my office hours. You can see the tutor. So lots of opportunities to ask questions in this week that we have to prepare for the exam. Good luck, everyone. I hope you all do very well.